So my name is Raj Soren. I'm the host today. And first of all, thank you for joining us. We do appreciate you joining, especially on a Sunday before bank holiday. And this session today is with Natalie Lockyer. So privileged to have Natalie to share her knowledge and skills. I've known Natalie for nearly 20 years now. And she draws on experience as a life coach, as well as a instructor of fire walking. So that'd be really interesting if she touches on that subject. And she's a martial art jiu-jitsu instructor as well. And the fact that the topic is on fear, in relation to fear is not the enemy, and how befriending fear can help us achieve anything. So I'm sure that Natalie has lots of ideas that she can share with us in terms of how fear has a real impact on our lives. There's a number of questions that have already come through. So without further ado, Natalie, the floor is yours. And like we said, this is being recorded. If you do want your cameras on, then that's perfectly fine. But we want to share this information with as many as possible. So Natalie, we're looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you. So I'm going to start with, I'd love this to be interactive. So if you've got questions, please jump on. If you're not comfortable voicing them because it's being recorded, please send a direct message to Raj and he will read it out without your name on it. And you know, this is about you getting what you want out of it. So please do jump in. I'm going to try and answer questions in a bit of an order. So I might say I'm coming on to that. But yeah, feel free to jump in and say hey and voice your opinions and challenges as well. So this is just a perspective I'm offering. And I'd also like to say, I know some of the questions we've had come in are specific to anxiety. Today I'm talking about fear in general, rather than anything that's been specifically diagnosed. I think we can talk about those, and I'm going to try and bring in some of my answers on them. But when we have anything like anxiety, depression, stress, any kind of PTSD, that's very specialized field, and I would always encourage you to go and see a specialized therapist or anything like that. So as a coach, I don't have as much training as a therapist would have, so just want to bring that in there. But we'll try and have an open conversation about it, and hopefully some of the things here today you can take away with you and are still useful. So a teeny tiny bit about me. Some of you are used to seeing me like this, where I've been on a jitsu mat since I was 15, and usually I've included that picture of me in someone else's gi. My students were usually quite a bit bigger than me. I was usually one of the smallest on the mat and quite often one of the few females on the mat. So I was used to being small and being introduced to the floor quite a lot. So I like to say I've got 17 years of learning how to fall over and get back up again. And it's taught me quite a lot about mindset and about resilience and stress and fear and a whole load of other things. I've done things like jumping out of planes, flying in planes, apparently all whilst being sane. I set up my own business a couple of years ago and quit my job at the time for it. So that was definitely fear. It led me to doing a lot of public speaking, which is listed normally as one of the 3 biggest fears, and it's usually listed as worse than death in most people's systems. And it's also led me to playing with fire. And what we like to do is challenge fear and train with fear by walking over things like fire and glass walks. And we do this with a lot of facilitation, a lot of training, and it helps you embrace the parts of you that you really need to say hello to. And it's quite fun too. So some questions I've got for you today is, I think it's really important to know what we mean by fear, because we can use it in so many different ways. So I'd like you to take a couple of minutes, maybe voice in, if you're happy to voice in, what does fear mean to you? Do you sort of know what your fear is? Not your specific fear, but when you think of fear as a whole, what does it mean to you?
You can put those in the chat.
Yeah, I'm going to list up the other questions as well so we can get warm. What do you think fear has held you back from? And this might be something you just want to write down as we go along and reflect on after the talk as well. And what does fear give you? Because it does give you something. Listening to your fear, adhering to your fear, it gives you something. And when you can figure that out, it really then helps us move on from being held back by it. And then what are your current beliefs about your fear? So what's your story? What's your internal monologue? What's your lens on how you should treat fear? Because once we know those, we can then shape where we want to go from there. And how would life change if fear was no longer an adversary? So does anybody want to offer anything in right now, or are you kind of happy keeping it to yourself and scribbling down some reflections there?
You can either put it in the chat, or I can ask the question now. If anyone's brave enough to do that. Chris?
Yeah, I would say in terms of what is fear to you, it's a sort of a physical response, possibly as well as a mental response to something that's, that's about to happen, or you perceive is about to happen. So, whether that be butterflies in the stomach or, things like that.
Nice, thank you. So it's that physical feeling of your body responding to fear. It's sort of, that's how you know it's there. It's like those knots in the stomach and things.
Yeah.
Great. And we're going to come on to that in a minute as well. So thank you. James, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I always get the same physical symptoms. So that knot in the stomach, but actually the emotions are quite different. And I can never quite work out why it's different in different situations. So sometimes I kind of just lock up, and other times I find myself getting frustrated a lot quicker than I think I should. So I've never quite worked out why, but I get quite different responses in different situations and at different times as well.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Our fear shows up very differently in different situations. I love that. I think it's important to acknowledge the types and flavors of fear. And we're going to talk about that later, because that then helps us know how to train with it. Thank you.
Got a comment from Jyoti, not knowing what is going to happen next.
Yeah, that's usually a very big fear. Are we in control? What will happen? How can I make sure I'll be safe coming out of this? Great. So I'm going to leave those questions with you if you want to take a screenshot, if you want to, hopefully you've written them down. And I'm going to ask that maybe you consider reflecting on them afterwards as well. After this session, there'll be a few more questions at the end for you to take away with you to hopefully help take this learning with you, because we definitely can't take on fear in just a 45-minute session. So it takes a bit of reflection. So why do I say fear is not the enemy? We hear a lot, fear is the enemy, face the fear, do it anyway, overcome the fear, ignore fear, I have no fear in my heart, all these things. I even hear false evidence appearing real. And I don't believe that's true personally. My perspective is that fear is very real. It's the same way that we see. When we see, we're actually interpreting the light signals that are coming into our eyes. And even our sight, our visual sight of the physical world, is an interpretation of what we expect to be there rather than what actually is. So I would argue false evidence appearing real is reality. And that's totally okay to feel whatever fear you feel. It's there for a reason. It is very real. It should not be ignored. And it is not the enemy. And fighting it, for me, doesn't help. And I'll go into why. So first of all, is defined in a dictionary as an unpleasant emotion caused by threat of danger, pain, or harm. And this can include psychological harm or pain as well as physical. And that's really, really important for where we're going to go today. And something that's really, really interesting is we get those heart rate increases that we were talking about already. You probably feel fluttering in our stomach. That's actually restriction of blood going to our organs because we need to run. We don't need to eat at that point. Increased heart rate, adrenaline levels, a whole load of things are going through our body. But what's interesting is when we look at the brain, some of the chemical reactions that are happening there also occur in fear, as well as they do with positive emotions like happiness and excitement. And that's why I believe we can train with our fear to reframe it and change our response to it rather than fight it. Because when we can understand it and dig deep into what it is, we can have a conversation with it, which we'll come on to later, and then we can start changing it. And we also get this when we do things like, I love going on roller coaster rides. I have friends who hate it. Some people love watching scary films. I can't do that. I still then have to sleep with the light on. Like, have a whole friendship formed over the fact I can't watch Supernatural on my own because I'm that much of an adult. So these things we do them because we like that little bit of adrenaline, and it comes out as happiness and excitement rather than as true fear. And I think that kind of helps reframe it sometimes a little bit. And most importantly, it's there to identify danger, pain, or harm so that it doesn't happen to us. And our fear is there to keep us safe, which is why I don't believe it's the enemy. There is some fear we absolutely should listen to, like don't step in front of that moving car. Jumping off that cliff would definitely be a bad idea, particularly as you don't have a parachute right now, and all of these kinds of things. And that kind of fear is a very good fear to listen to. And it's trying to make sure you don't die. So really briefly, and this is for scientists in the room and people doing neurology, I apologize, this is a GCSE level type stuff, but basically fear happens when our reptilian brain, or our amygdala, which is like the very central part of our brain, perceives a threat, and it's trained itself to perceive threats through experience. So when we're a child, when something threatens us, we store that as an experience, we notice the patterns surrounding it, and then we start recognizing it. And this can be as much as seeing something out the corner of your eye that might be dangerous, picking up on a feeling or a certain smell even triggering it because you know it's dangerous. The same way we would learn this food's bad because I saw somebody eat it and bad things happened, is that kind of thing. What then happens is after we've gone, uh-oh, there's something dangerous, alert, alert, red stations going in our brain, the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex, which is sort of the outer part of our brain, the newer part of our brain, goes, okay, let's figure out why it's dangerous. And I think it's important to notice we have an emotive and immediate response from our reptilian brain, and then we rationalize it, rather than rationally recognizing something and then having an emotive response to it. And that's sometimes why it's really hard to control, or why we notice fear showing up in our bodies before we have a thought process connected to it. And then we release hormones as a response to that into our body, and we get this fight or flight happening. And this is great if we're trying to escape a tiger or something that's really going to harm us, or we're trying to neutralize a very difficult situation. Fear is our friend because it keeps us safe. But what happens is when we're looking for danger that doesn't exist anymore, so particularly psychological threats that we think might be there but aren't, then it's not our friend because it's going, oh, it's really dangerous, even though it's not, even though nothing bad will happen to us. And so that's why it's really important to know our fear triggers, because if we can start to understand what's triggering my fear, we can start separating the fear I need to listen to and the fear I'd like to train with and lessen and minimize, then we can start changing our response to it. And so our thoughts then can shape our reality, they can trigger emotions, and our behavior can stimulate those emotions. So this like cycle happens, and we use it in cognitive behavioral coaching and therapy, where we will try and go, what is the evidence for this? What is the feeling for this? What is the physical response for this? So it's physical feeling, emotional feeling, and then our behavior, how do we react? And I think, was it James who said, sometimes I get frustrated and sometimes I freeze up. That's the different behaviors happening for you. There's different loops associated with different thoughts and feelings, probably. Does that make some kind of sense?
It does, yeah.
Yeah, so there's probably different situations where you've learned somewhere in your past that freezing is better than getting frustrated.
Okay.
And it's also really interesting, Tony Robbins talk about why anger and frustration is actually something we go to when we feel out of control, because it's certain. We know the response to being angry or being frustrated at someone, and it can make us feel in control. So often when we're scared, we get angry, so it makes us feel safer, which is a bit weird, but when you follow it through, it does work. And really key is our body expresses and connects and drives them all. So like right now, I've got a little bit of energy going on, and that's great. Hopefully it's going to come out and give energy towards you guys, but that could also be seen as some fear and some nerves happening. So I can feel that happening in my body, maybe take a few breaths before we come on this call, and then also use my posture to help calm that down. And this is a really cool study. I can share the link with you later if you want, just pop it a message in the chat and I can share it with you. They basically did heat sensing on the body, and you can see different emotions, lots of different candidates. said what emotion they were feeling, and they did heat sensors on them. And this is our physical response to certain emotions. And I find it kind of fascinating how close some are. So anger and fear are quite close, but anger is more certain.
Mm.
And you can see happiness is like the whole of your body, and then depression is very little. It's actually everything's withdrawn. That might explain some of the emptiness we say we feel. And you can see love actually stimulates quite a lot of the similar places as fear. So it's not easy to always distinguish between them as well.
Comment there from James. I don't know if you can see that.
No, I can't. Can you read it out, please?
Okay. So I'm really familiar with CBT, triangle, and I never thought about the idea of anger or frustration being a response to fear, because it feels like control. So thank you for the observation.
Oh, you're welcome. I hope it helps. And there's a really great Tony Robbins talk on the 6 human needs that might really help with that one as well. And if you want, I can send it to you afterwards.
That'd be great. Thanks, Natalie.
You're welcome. Might need to nudge me and remind me at the end. So I love this quote. This is from Tim Ferriss. It's, fear is your friend. It's an indicator. Sometimes it shows you what you shouldn't do, but more often than not, it shows you what you should. And it's this whole premise, and hands up, this is not a new one. This is not something I've come up with. It's been talked about for hundreds of years. Fear will highlight where we need to go. And we're going to talk about how and why. I'm just trying to bring a bit of humour in. How do we go from seeing tigers that aren't real and wanting to run away from them to befriending them and feeling comfortable with them? We've got a few steps here. And anybody who knows me knows I've got motivational quotes on pretty much everything. I've finally found pencils that have motivational quotes on, so I'm going to throw another one at you. And this is from Bruce Lee. It's like one of my all-time heroes, one of the reasons why I got into martial arts. To understand fear is the beginning of really seeing. Because when we understand our fear, we understand ourselves so much better, and we understand others so much better. And it can be a really good place of connection if we've done that inner work. So some of the key ingredients we're going to go through are the 3 C's: courage, curiosity, and community. Creating a challenge habit, and that's by using neuroplasticity, and using play and humour, and using vulnerability and sharing bravely. And I am a massive Brené Brown fan, so
so am I.
Who was that?
I love her so much. She's on my list of people I'd have at my dinner table if I could have anybody at a dinner party. So I will be using some of the concepts she has. So do we have any questions before I go into like some of these ingredients of what I believe? And this is all my perspective, right? So you might be sat there going, don't believe that. And that's totally okay. Do you have any questions before we go into any of these?
So Natalie, sorry,
who was that?
It's Yasmin.
Yasmin.
I had a quote of my own, something that I learnt. We used to have a lot of motivational speakers at one time. Raj will remember when we worked together. And one of the authors that I was introduced to many years ago was Sun Tzu.
Yes. Art of War.
Yeah, Art of War, you know the one. And there's a really famous quote in there. If you know the enemy and you know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles.
Yeah.
And if you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. Now, the way I applied that to my work, we talked early on in the conversation that, my fear comes from public speaking. And this is something that we had to do an awful lot of in front of customers, in front of consultants. And I think my fear was driven by the fact that I wasn't sure of what they might ask me, whether my knowledge would be up to par, and whether I would start. And one of the fear things was that I started tripping over my words, even though I knew my subject.
She used to do a course I'd just done.
So I think knowing the enemy for me was kind of doing a bit of background work, knowing who I was addressing, knowing what makes them think and how they would react to situations. And that's how I kind of overcame my fear.
Mm-hmm. I think that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. I would say that's a really good use of curiosity and courage to sort of go, okay, fear, thanks for showing up, but I need to do this. So how am I going to overcome this? How am I going to feel more comfortable? And I love that. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, Sun Tzu is a good one to go for some inspiration.
Thank you, Yasmin. Now, there's a few questions that came in earlier today. I think you may have sent them to you earlier. Natalie, I know there was a situation where an individual is quite anxious to have a conversation with their boss. They're being off on long-term sick. I know that you can't add too much detail to this, but any thoughts on that?
I was wondering if those questions, if I could bring in at the end, just because hopefully some of what's in this presentation will address that, and then we can talk more specifically about that at the end, if that's all right with you.
Sure. Yeah, there's two other questions that was sent you as well, so we can go through that at the end. Is there any other questions from the audience while we're here at the moment? Okay, we'll continue. Thank you.
Excellent. So my 3 C's, why do we need these? So courage, first of all change requires willingness to learn and fail, and that requires some courage because we're going to be vulnerable. And if you know Brené Brown, you know that courage is about vulnerability, it's about connection, it's about putting yourself out there. Now, it doesn't mean you have to get every part of you out there in the world that's seen as oversharing, but just having a little bit of okayness with being vulnerable means you can step into courage. And it's a really gentle reminder that we cannot be brave if we are not first afraid. You cannot be courageous. There's no such thing as fearless and brave. If you are fearless, you can't be brave, because bravery is about overcoming fear. So you must feel that first. So the bravest person is the scaredest person in the room who does it anyway. And that needs to be celebrated. Paired with that, we're going to need some curiosity to understand our fear, to understand how we can overcome it, to understand how we can train with it, and to understand what it is we need to bring in to feel more comfortable and confident. So that's lots of questions, that's seeking answers, that's play. Thank you so much for sharing that example, Yasmin. I think that's a great example of, okay, what do I need to do to feel more comfortable, and how can I do that? And then you've gone and found the information for yourself. And finally, I would say that any personal development change, particularly in befriending fear, if you have a community around you where you feel safe to have open conversation, where you feel there are people who are like you, who've maybe experienced similar things to you, have been there, done that, and are ahead of you, all of these things are going to help you grow exponentially. Doing it on your own is the single hardest way, and is not really the best way to do things. Learning from others really, really will make you grow exponentially, and it will make sure you have a safe place to recover as well when things are a little more challenging. So I'm going to talk about how to find that community, but I would say please do reach out to people that you feel safe with, comfortable with, and who maybe can have that conversation with you and inspire you. So these are some little things that I personally use to find courage. I like to break down the fear and understand it. So Yasmin, great example. You're like, okay, what is it? Well, I don't know about the people. I'm stumbling over my words, even though I know the subject matter. So I want to make sure that I'm really clear on the things they might ask me. How do I do that? I get to know the person. So I'm going to do some background research on them. I get to know what they've had previously presented, and then I can feel more prepared. For me, I remember my sensei, who is 4'11", Sensei Mary, for anybody who remembers her, handing me my hakama, which are like trousers you get when you get to be instructor level. And she said to me, these trousers will answer every question for you. Even when you go into a meeting in work, put your hakama on in your head and you'll be able to answer every question. I didn't believe her, but it works. I still put on my hakama mentally in my head before I go into something where I'm like, oh gosh, do I know the answer to this? And it's amazing once you've had an entire class of like small people asking you crazy questions on a technique you didn't expect. Yeah, but Sensei, what if they've got a gun? And you're like, okay, we're going to have that question, are we? It makes you feel a lot more comfortable answering questions as well. So really looking to break down the fear and understand it. Take small steps and challenges every day, and we'll go into this more detail in a little bit, but it's about small steps rather than big leaps, and doing it safely. Looking for inspiration near and far. So I have people that I love, like Brené, helps me keep myself authentic, helps me go, it's okay to own your mess, it's okay to be human. And she's up there like world famous, and she's having chats with Simon Sinek and all these kinds of things. And she's owning her mistakes, and that's fine. If she can do it, I can too. resting in your comfort zone. So we quite often see the comfort zone as a bad thing, but I think it's really, really good when we go there consciously. It's when we're unconsciously staying there or allowing our fear to trap us there that becomes a problem. So we need rest times. We need to go, you know what, today I need to do nothing. I need to be not public. I need to not be brave. I need to just be somewhere safe and comfortable. And I'm going to do it in these ways. And this is what I know works for me. And breathe. Breathing is really important. I found that out when I tried doing an entire technique, holding my breath the first few times when I was a teenager. My sensei literally had to come up to me and go, and breathe. And you're like, your body responds very differently when you don't have oxygen in you. And recognition. So often our fear won't let us see how far we've come. When we've done something that was challenging, we need to recognize it, even if it's talking to a stranger, which would have terrified you, or presenting to 2 people because that's all you could do that day. That's huge. If it's the first 2 people, if your fear was really loud on that day and you did it anyway, recognize your achievements and play. We're going to come on to play and fun. I like this one. I think curiosity is brilliant. I like bringing my inner child into things a lot of the time. And we would use play a lot in Jitsu as well, particularly for some of the more serious techniques. When we introduce them, particularly when we were introducing things like knife work, we would use rubber knives for safety. We'd also play games. And I don't know if anybody else noticed that, but you know, when you've got like 6 people stalking you with rubber knives and like, I got you, I got you, it's kind of fun. If you equate that to a real life thing, it starts getting scary. So it starts bringing in play, starts making fearful concepts safer to explore and discover. And then we can really go into the more serious stuff later on once we've got comfortable with that first entry level of things. So try new things. Novelty is the key to neuroplasticity, it's the key to rewiring your brain and telling your fear to be quiet. Try new things, even if it's a new food, a new way to take a walk. If you've not gone down a certain alleyway when we're all doing our daily walk at the moment, go a different way, find something new in the world and see something new. Hello, small person. Invite new perspectives in, and this is part of doing things like meeting new people, listening to new music, new podcasts, watching different TV, asking questions a lot of different people and getting really curious. What is your worldview? And if it doesn't align with mine, that's great, but then I get to understand why. And I think bringing those perspectives in is fantastic. Like today, you're inviting mine in, so thank you very much. And then play, laugh and have fun. If you can laugh at anything you're doing, exactly, if you can laugh at what you're doing and if you can laugh at yourself, this fear thing will go away. Nice demonstration, thank you.
I'm trying to say this before.
And connecting with community. So how do we find it? I've had a lot of people say, how do I find my community? Well, who inspires you? Your community can be people you allow into your life. This can include the podcast that you're listening to. So Brené, I would consider part of my community. I'm part of that conversation by listening to what she's saying. Who encourages you? Who is already where you want to be? So that person that's ahead of you that can be your mentor. Who pushes you, and this can be different to encouragement. So encouragement can be like, oh, you're great, I think you can do this. Who pushes you is like, you know what, I think you can do a bit more. You know what, now actually, you don't just need to do 1 presentation, you need to do 2. It's that person that goes, we're going to take you outside this comfort zone. I know you can do it, and they really push you. And then who's your cheerleader? That might be somebody who doesn't know what's going on. I've had quite a lot of people who were in day-to-day jobs when I was doing the coaching. They were cheering me along. They couldn't give me advice. They couldn't be there, do that, but they could definitely go, you know what, I believe in you. And those people are really important as well. So once we've got that courage, curiosity, and community happening, then we've got kind of like the support to go into what I call befriending and then training with fear. And I love this picture. This is sort of like what happens in my head quite a lot of the time. I also work with a lot of clients about meeting our versions of ourselves, and I do a bit of meditation with them and that kind of thing. And I find it really, really powerful. And a lot of clients have massive shifts when they couldn't articulate what was going on in words in a very conscious way. when we do the meditation, they suddenly find they understand themselves much better in a inner self kind of way. So I find it really great. And it's basically this idea that we create a space that we are in control of within us. And we invite parts of us to come and say hello and go, what's going on? Why are you bugging me? Why are you keeping me awake? Why are you shouting and screaming at me? Why are you back there in my mind? What are you trying to tell me? We find that when we listen to these parts of ourselves and we have a talk and we wonder what it's trying to protect us from, particularly with fear, to understand what are you trying to protect me from? And I think this answers some of the questions that we had come up, Raj, is what is the anxiety about going back to work or returning to normal about? Specifically, get really, really specific. What am I actually worried about? And ask that question several times, go really deep, because once we know that, we can then listen to it, allow that to feel heard, and we can start doing the thing of, okay, how am I going to counteract that? How am I going to feel in control? What do I need to do to feel safe in this moment so the fear can be quieter? We need to also understand, if we listen to our fear, if we let our fear keep us in our comfort zone, which is what it's trying to do, it's trying to keep us safe. So if we let our fear keep us safe, what does it give us? Because there's a reason why we listen to it. And we have a question coming up, and we'll go deeper into this in a minute, about fear of success or fear of failure. When we're worried about being successful or we're worried about failing, there's a lot going on. But keeping ourselves small or pushing ourselves forwards gives us something. So we need to understand what we're gaining by listening to fear, so then we can give it up. Because if that's too strong, if it's keeping me connected to my community and my friends and my family, then I'm not gonna let it go. No matter how much my conscious mind tries doing it, my unconscious will keep me in the place I don't want to be. And this is why we can repeat habits that we don't want to have, but we keep repeating them. Then there's the what evidence is there for fear? Is it supported? Is it likely to happen? You know, quite often the fear stood there in front of this big group of people, and it's like, well, what is actually the worst thing that could happen if I do this talk and nobody agrees with me? Okay, I learned some stuff and I changed the talk, I don't do it again. Well, I'm not going to die. My limbs aren't going to fall off. My heart's not going to stop. And I will still have friends and family, and I will still be a worthwhile human being who's worthy of love. So when we start being able to break it down like that, our fear can get quieter. I used to have to sometimes do it with Jitsu when I'm facing some big, strong people and I'm not having a great day on the mat and I'm feeling small and tiny and weak and they're all bigger and stronger and faster than me. And there's 3 of them. And my sensei's going, well, you really need to go this way, you need to go that way. And my head's going, I'm going to die. Parts of me are going to fall off. And I had to remind myself that actually I had an instructor there, because if it was going to go really wrong, A, the people in front of me were my friends. They didn't want to hurt me. They weren't gonna. And B, there was an instructor there to keep me safe. So if I made a big mistake somewhere, or somebody slipped or something happened, they'd call stop and then I'd be safe. So I had to remind myself of that before I could go in and then feel a bit more secure in what I was doing. And then it's looking at how we can reframe the fear. And we don't have time to really go into a lot of reframing techniques here, but it's changing it. So we can do that by ways of saying, thank you for showing up. I hear what you said. Thank you for your protection, because it's trying to protect you. But I would like to take on this challenge. So the fear feels heard. The fear feels seen. And it knows that you're taking an intentional risk, which sounds a bit weird, right? But you are talking to a part of yourself. Your fear is you. It's part of you. So we need to help it feel seen and heard, and help it know that this is us intentionally going in and we're going to be safe doing what we want to do. So I love Disney. I think Disney gives us a lot of life lessons sometimes, maybe not the traditional Disney. Does anybody know where this is from? Some of you must have seen this.
Monsters Inc.
Yes. And who's the little girl? She's called Boo. So the monster's job is to go in and scare little children and get their screams because they're really powerful, right? Can you see Monster Inc? Yeah. But Boo, for some reason, is not scared of the scariest monster, and she just laughs. And they accidentally find out that laughs are so much more powerful than screams. And that's so true in life. Our laughter can get us through so much more than our fear can. So when we're scared, sometimes laughing at it is a really good thing. And there's another little quote for you there saying, fear is only an enemy of those who have not learned to befriend its cause. So I say, embrace your inner Boo. Be a bit giggly, be a bit adventurous and curious, and don't let the monsters scare you. So has anybody heard of growth mindset?
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. So it was invented, well, not invented, but it was first put into a formal kind of theory by a psychologist called Carol Dweck back in the 80s. And there's two ideas. One is a growth mindset and one's a fixed mindset. And the fixed mindset, we can interchange between these. Even when we've practiced growth mindset, I can see myself slipping in and out of fixed. So it's not like, I'm here now, I have arrived. I no longer have a fixed growth mindset, fixed mindset. You know, we hop in and out of those places. Fixed mindset is where we see fear as limiting of my abilities. The failure is limiting of my abilities. We see I'm either good at it or I'm not. That if I'm not good, then I'm frustrated and I give up. I see other people's successes as directly infringing upon mine and I can't celebrate them, and so on and so forth. And this can bring up envy, jealousy, frustration, anger, social anxiety. And it's particularly when we're comparing ourselves to others critically. Now, I don't see there's any harm in comparing to others to learn, but if we're comparing ourselves to others to criticize, it doesn't work. So growth mindset is challenges help me grow. I like to try new things. Failure is an opportunity to grow. So we would quite often pressure test a throw or a technique to see where does it go wrong. Sometimes that would lead us into finding another way of doing it, which is great. And when I first started, I was 16 and I ended up in an adult club and there were only guys and we'd do ground fighting. And I would lose every single week, like week in, week out. I was definitely pummeled, but every week it took them a little bit longer to beat me. So I got to learn. And I remember my instructor saying to me, if you win, you only learn one way to win. If you fail, you learn 100 ways to not win. And that really came through. And it meant that I could learn to adapt techniques a lot more. I go, oh, I've been here before. What did I do last time? Oh, yeah, I got out that way. And it really is true in life that our failures teach us so much more than our successes ever do. And that can be a real challenge to change our mindset. Ways we can do that, we can reframe our negative thoughts. So we can talk about that and I can send some exercises to do that afterwards if you'd like. Accepting compliments. Yes, this was a really big one for me. People would give me compliments and I would so easily dismiss it in some way or some form, and I couldn't just take it and say thank you. And I think we often struggle with this. First step is to believe that the person giving you the compliment believes it's true. Whether you do or not, that doesn't matter. They believe it's true and it's their reality and their truth. And the second step is to start believing it too. So if somebody says something nice about you, say thank you so much. You don't have to justify it. I love that top. Thanks, it's my favourite. Not, oh, thanks. Oh, it was a really cheap one, but you know, I just got it from here and I've had it years, but thank you. It's quite different, yeah? Look for the learning. So I also dance, and quite often in competitions, people can get really upset when somebody beats them. What I love doing is going back and looking at what did that person do that was different? What can I learn from them? What do I want to incorporate into my technique? What do I think is really good about it? And then I might even go up to them and say, hey, look, I've just reviewed our videos and I really love this thing that you did on the 8 count, and you did this spinning thing. How do you do that? Would you mind showing me? You can go and learn from them and they can teach you. It makes the other person feel great as well, by the way. If you are that person that somebody's come up to you, like, yes, somebody likes something I did. Embrace challenge, not adversity. And this is something I learned from the firewalking, is it's not about being at rock bottom, at being the worst, at being in the hardest place. It's not about has somebody else got it better or worse than you. It's about you embracing challenge. And challenge is, this is something that will learn and grow me. This is something that will step me out my comfort zone, and it's conscious and you go into it. I think so easily we can feel like we need to prove ourselves through our adversity rather than our chosen challenges. And that's a really big difference for me. When I realized that, I was like, oh, okay. So I don't have to be on the down and out. I could be really great and then challenging myself. And that's my place of growth. And allowing to connect to who you are and understanding you are enough just as you are. I think confidence comes from knowing where we are and where we wish to go, and that is all totally okay. It doesn't come from being the best person in the room. In fact, quite often being the best person in the room can bring up a lot of anxiety about having imposter syndrome and these kinds of things. So if you want to be confident, connect with who you are, know that you're enough right here, right now, no matter where you are at in life, and that where you want to go and grow is also perfectly good as well. And celebrate other people's successes and allow them to celebrate you. If somebody wants to celebrate you, let them. So I'm just mindful of time. We're going to come into it, but what I really want to bring into this is you can change your brain patterns throughout your life due to your interactions with your environment and other people. And we used to think the brain was never changed. We used to think we had a certain number of brain cells and that was it. But we now realize we can grow new brain cells and we can change connections in the brain as well on a vast scale, which is really exciting. And we're coming to the end here. So some of the things I've spelled out in the 3 C's, in the growth mindset, and bringing in neuroplasticity is the way we can do that is to test our boundaries, is to start small, have little challenges every day. So one of my little challenges when I started embracing fear was when I noticed something I liked about someone, I would tell them. And that includes the person checking your shopping at the supermarket. Somebody's got a nice pair of earrings. I was going, I love the earrings that you've chosen today. Because otherwise I'd be looking at them, thinking it, and they'd never hear it. And you know what? It's gotten some great conversations and some great reactions. But the first 100, 200 times I did it, I felt like the weird person having the conversation with the checkout person. Similarly, going into big groups of people, I used to get really nervous and really worried. And recently a friend has described me as a Labrador puppy going in, who's just like, oh my gosh, there's all these friends I haven't met yet. But I had to change my mindset and I had to start challenging myself in big settings. Like, okay, you're going to find one group of people and you're going to go say hello, and it's going to be okay if they don't want to interact with you. And so I started small, a bit like in the gym. We don't suddenly go from no gym to deadlifting 120 kilos or doing a marathon. You might be able to achieve it, but it will probably injure you and you probably won't be doing it tomorrow. So we want to start small and train up. We need to learn the different flavors of our fear. We talked about this earlier. There are some fears you really want to talk to and listen to and adhere to, like the one that's saying, oh, there's a car coming towards you, you need to move. There are other fears, like the public speaking one, that maybe you want to say, hey, thank you for showing up, but I really want to accept this challenge right now. And James would go back to the different ways you respond to your fears is digging deep and understanding what's going on in each individual fear and how you're going to combat them and why do you respond differently to them. So why is one frustration and one is freezing? And when you understand that, then you can start challenging it and going, okay, cool. So in these situations, I feel uncomfortable and I freeze. So what I'm going to do is find a small version of that. And I'm going to challenge myself to move in some way. So you can set the mini challenges and those mini milestones. Learn to rest. It's really important. We don't want to challenge ourselves every single day.
Yeah.
Recognize growth and repeat. So I got a few reflections and then we'll open the floor to some questions. I love this book, My Friend Fear. I think it's a really good book and it reframed things differently. And things I'd like you to go away with on top of the ones at the beginning are, what challenges do you want to invite into your life today? I facilitate people walking over fire and broken glass. They are things that in our minds should not be okay. But when we get our mindset right, when we go over with the right intention and we do it with the right meaning in our hearts, we can do them. Our body can do incredible things. Our minds can do incredible things if we go into them in the right way. So what challenge do you want to invite into your life today? How will you train with your fear day to day? What are those little milestones for you personally? What are the little challenges that you're going to find difficult to do? Is that accepting a compliment? Is that saying hello to a stranger? Or is that maybe having a challenging conversation with a loved one because you need to have it? And a year from now, what do you hope Befriending Fear will have given you? So I hope that kind of brings in some of the stuff. I've got a last quote and then we'll go to questions. So this is Eleanor Roosevelt, also a good go-to for anything inspirational. You gain strength, courage, and confidence by every experience in which you really stop and look fear in the face. You must do the thing you think you cannot do. And if martial arts taught me nothing else, is that when I'm facing a big room full of big people who've all got various weapons and I'm bigger and stronger than me, is that my biggest enemy in that room is me and how I'm thinking.
Yeah.
If I get my mind and the heart in the right place, then everything else falls into place and I can do incredible things.
Very good quote by Eleanor Roosevelt.
I love her. So I've talked way too much. Do people have questions, views, opinions they want to share?
Well, first of all, thank you, Natalie. That was excellent. I know that one or two questions will come through in just a moment. Maybe you can sort of touch on that situation we mentioned earlier, sort of either fear or the concern about how to deal with a boss, but to just top line it, because obviously Liz can do a little more detail.
So when we're interacting with people we find challenging, and this is coming from a place of wellness first. So when we've got other things that may be, so if we are feeling anxiety, if we are off sick with mental wellness problems or physical wellness problems, then this can be more challenging. But I would advise is understanding what is it we find challenging about that person, specifically what, and how can we overcome it. I would say in that situation, if a boss is being particularly challenging, without going into details, if they're asking you to do something that you feel is inappropriate or not something that you can do right now, do you feel safe enough to say, that's not something I feel I can do or I can do well right now? And Brené talks about it in armored or daring leadership. When we're in armored leadership, we feel we have to say yes to everything and prove our worth through our work. When we're in daring leadership, we know that we can voice when we are being asked to go outside of our stretch zone, our learning zone. And we can say, I don't believe I can do a good job on that right now. So we say what our boundary is. I would also say community. Ask HR to help you with this. You can have a very confidential conversation with HR. They are there to help you. I know sometimes they seem scary, but they are definitely there to help you overcome issues like this. And if your manager is asking you to do something that is actually contravening HR law, which in the specifics of this one, I'm not going to discuss on the call because Raj asked me not to, but to the person, I hope you're on this call. My understanding from looking at HR law is that they should not be asking you to do what they're asking you to do. So maybe talk to HR and get support there. And try and understand what's driving the behavior for the boss. So when we can understand the other person, what is their fear? What is causing them to do this, even if they might see it as inappropriate? We can then sometimes understand how we can respond to it, because there's a need for your boss to be behaving this way. They're fulfilling a need in some description. And so answering that need in another way can help them shift their behavior. But I know that's a lot to ask from you. And it might be that you need to reach out to community and you might need support. You can even ask for somebody else to be on the call with you so that they can then give you advice on how you can respond differently or moderate with your boss if they are being inappropriate. And I hope that answers your question.
Brilliant, thank you for that. Another question we had is fear of getting back to work, obviously lockdown, and sort of ending, sort of getting back to normal, whether it's going to the gym, going with the kids somewhere, or cinema, or just going back to work generally, and mixing with people again.
Yeah, so I think it's understanding what is it specifically about. What is that fear specifically about? Dig deep. For example, for me, I'm a very tactile person, but I've not touched more than 2 human beings, really, in the last year. So jitsu, dancing, an office environment, somebody just putting their hand on your arm, that's going to feel really jarring. So firstly, it's normal. Lots of people are feeling this way. You are not alone. Secondly, dig deep and understand what's going on for you with the fear. Talk to it. Ask it, what are you trying to protect me from? Is that getting ill? Okay. What for me would make me feel safe in this situation? Get curious. Look at how you can control it. You can wear your mask. You can carry hand sanitizer with you and sanitize your hands as often as you want. You can wash your hands as often as you want. You can ask colleagues to stay a certain distance from you, and if they don't do this, you can remind them. Always remind them of your comfort zone, always remind them of your boundaries. They should respect that. We're all gonna need to understand everybody will have different comfort levels coming back into this world, and we need to respect them. We need to show some compassion about that. And what is okay for you? Is it that maybe you could do one day in the office, but then socializing in the evening is going to be too much? What's the small challenge for you? How can you have those little steps going back in? Plan it out and go, okay, on an office day, then I'm just staying at home and I'm doing my socializing on Zoom, because that's my challenge for the day, is going into the office. And I'm gonna, if I can, I'm gonna drive myself, these kinds of things. And it's going to be dependent on the very specific situations of your life. But plan out those little challenges, understand your boundaries, and know what your fear is really trying to say to you. And then you can plan how to counteract it and go, thank you for keeping me safe. I need to take this challenge because the world is going back. And this is how we're going to do it. This is how we're going to stay safe doing this. Does that make sense? Does that help?
Thank you, it's very useful. Is there any more other questions for Natalie before we come to the end of this session?
I think we had an interesting one about fear of success.
Yes.
And fear of failure.
Indeed.
Very, very generally and very, very quickly, we fear being successful for the same reason that we fear failure. And that is because, evolutionary speaking, to not be accepted by a tribe would mean we're on our own, would mean we're more vulnerable, we're less likely to survive. Now we are so connected in this world, and there's such a variety of people, you will find your tribe wherever you go. And the only way to find your true tribe, your true people that you belong with, is being you. Now, often we fear that being successful would mean we lose our friends and our family because they're not there with us. If they love you, they will be there with you no matter what. We also fear that through failure, people will no longer want to include us, respect us, or give us love. It's exactly the same thing that's going on underneath. And this is what I mean by understanding your fear. Success and failure, they're there. Failure, we can counteract that with some growth mindset, going, the failure is the learning, it's fantastic, maybe other people can learn from me, isn't that great that I know this now, and understand that I am whole and I am perfect as I am, and I am intended to grow. You can't tell a tree to stop growing, right? It just keeps growing until it's done. It's like going to the oak tree, stop it! You are the perfect size, no more growing. It's exactly the same thing for you. But through growth, you need failure. And through failure, you'll grow, and that will lead to success. So you will be loved no matter what state you are in, and you need to accept and know that. Thank you.
That's excellent. James has just let me know that Tamini Jai has had a hand up for some time. Sorry about that, I didn't realise that. So Minnie, if you can share your question, come off mute. Still with us?
Or type it in the chat.
Yep.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, I hear you now.
Hi. Hi, Sensei. So I typed it on the chat thing, like, because Sensei Nat mentioned that you should try and like challenge yourself more, but not adversity. But then like now I'm a bit confused about what's the difference between a challenge and adversity, because a lot of like athletes or like sports people, they tend to sort of treat adversity as their like best friend to move forward. I don't know if that's like a different mindset or like a different perspective that I'm not getting. I don't know.
Yeah, I hear you. So I feared this when I was doing the fire walking. I was like, oh, we're pushing ourselves and we're like doing crazy things like walking 108 times over hot coals, like, because that's sane and sensible. And then we go like, I'm going to break some bottles, then I'm going to walk on them, because that's definitely what a rational person does. You know, when does it become dangerous? When does it become too much? And the guy who started the firewalking said it's not about adversity, it's about challenge, and it's how you feel in that moment. So one person's adversity would be another person's challenge. So I'd say in terms of the athletes that you're talking about, what they might call adversity is like, you know, I have to eat a certain way, I have to get up at 5 a.m, I have to train every day, my body's exhausted, but then that's intentional challenge and they've built up to it. And the reason why they're doing that, knowing their why for it, is really important.
Oh, okay.
Why do you want to do that thing? Why do you want to have that challenge? What will it give you? There's no point in doing something that it's not going to bring you anything. That's not a challenge for you.
Yeah, right.
I think that's a really good point, because you might see somebody else doing something and they're like, oh, you should do this, it's really awesome. And you're like, you know what, that's not for me. And thank you for inviting me, but that's not the challenge that I need personally. That's totally okay. So I say challenge is something that you consciously choose. You understand why you are doing it, and the what you gain from it is greater than any difficulty you receive doing it. I'd say adversity is a place of seeking struggle. That the point of doing it is the struggle rather than the outcome. It's not necessarily something we are consciously choosing, and it can be quite harmful. For me, that's how I would change it. Does that help?
I think so, yeah.
Cool.
Thank you.
There's a few other questions I'm just reading through. Oh, yes, some really good points from Barb. Thank you. Anything else before we go? Because I'm conscious of taking your time on a Sunday afternoon.
Just give people a chance to unmute if you have any more questions or comments.
I would also like to add in, whilst people are maybe having a little moment to think, is what Jitsu taught me was I would seek those moments when I would have some one-on-one time or like 3-on-1 time with the instructor, and they'd say, what do you want to work on? And we'd never work on a thing we were awesome at. We'd always work on a thing that we found challenging, that we found harder to do, that we wanted to improve the most in, because that's where you have the most value. It's great, the instructor going, oh yeah, that's a really nice technique, you've nailed it. But for us, and you know, I don't know if anybody else's experience is the same, but usually we would work on the thing that we're struggling with, because that's where we get the most value and input from the instructor from. And I think that's the growth mindset in a very visceral way.
I think I very much agree with you. We grow through struggle and challenges with the right attitude. So I very much sort of follow your thoughts on that one. I don't think we've got any more questions unless I've missed anyone. So first of all, let's show our appreciation to Natalie for an excellent presentation and discussions. I think a wonderful job. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you very much for giving me your time today. I know it's busy on a bank holiday weekend, so thank you.
And you've kept everyone asking questions as well as staying on
I
board.
haven't seen anybody fall asleep, but you've all got your cameras off, so maybe you did.
Yeah. And how do people contact you if they want any coaching or any sort of contact?
I mean, if you have any follow-up questions or anything else, you can find me on Facebook. I think most of you have me as personal contacts on Facebook, but you can also reach out to me on Natalie Lockyer Coaching on Instagram or Facebook. I also have a website, www.natalielockyercoaching.co.uk. There's a contact form on there, and my email's on there as well, so please do reach out. If you have any thoughts that happen after this as well, and you're like, oh, I want to ask this, then please do. If you want to know about any of the books or links or talks that I've mentioned here as well, please do message me. Thanks,
Fabulous.
Heather.
Excellent. So these Zoom sessions will be held once a month with different speakers from different backgrounds. So we do appreciate you taking part. And obviously, Natalie has shared some excellent ideas and tools around fear not being the enemy. And I wish you all the very best to get over those fears and concerns that you have to make you an even better, amazing person. So thank you once again, Natalie, and we look forward to seeing you again. Another presentation, hopefully in the future.
You never know, we might do one on firewalking here.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks everyone. Take care.